Hello everyone, hopefully if I've done this right. I am Bad Tempered Badger and I am here today with Mr. Critical Cripple.
Good evening.
So how are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. I can't believe I'm still awake, but I'm doing very well. Feeling very furry and fluffy.
Hello everyone, hopefully
I'm just trying to make sure that the audio is coming through for both of us properly.
That's Critical Cripple.
You remember what I said in the question stream? That if you set it up to be what am I talking about? If you changed my name to say that I love Disney, I would make you a cow. Well, there we are.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe a bit of an echo for a second, but there we go. Right. So, dueling. Right, let me just set you to not be a cow anymore. There we go. You should be you now.
Hello, everyone.
Right, dueling. What do you reckon?
Well, it should obviously be legal.
Well, I am inclined to agree, but let's discuss the reasoning behind that, shall we?
Well, to be honest, I don't. I'm not necessarily sure I agree.
Why is that?
Right. Well, here's the problem. Well, firstly, what do you mean by dueling?
I think that is a variable topic. I think for dueling to be done as some way of settling disputes, I think there would need to be sort of an agreed upon standard way of doing it, but also I think it would be good for the people who have agreed to do it to be able to, in a sense, pick their competition.
Okay, but if you're going down that route, how do we not already have dueling?
Well, because I can't. Let's say that we have. Let's say that we had a. What's a good example that's completely non-controversial? Let's say that we had a YouTube show that we were both joint partners in.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to determine who would get the thing after we both went our separate ways. But we hadn't made a prior agreement on that. I think we should be able to agree legally to have a duel with swords, and the winner of that duel gets the thing.
Right. Here's the problem. How did you get to swords?
Because I like swords.
Right. What about a squash match?
I see no reason why a squash match wouldn't be usable, but I personally wouldn't pick a squash match. Stop saying squash! I personally wouldn't pick a squash match.
I mean, it's terribly hard to kill someone with a squash racket. I agree.
You don't have to kill someone with a sword. You could use practice swords.
Well, yeah, this is the point I was trying to get to. Okay, because if you wanted to define whether or not, or to determine whether or not something should be legal, you need terms under which it can be set up. I mean, determining a squash match that determines the outcome of a contract, that's doable. That's doable right now. Dueling is legal. Huzzah. Us having 10 paces and pistols, where one of us ultimately dies, not so much.
I don't think a dueling to the death should really be common, but I think it should be an option in the most extreme of disputes.
Why?
Because if the dispute is so if the dispute is so extreme and important to the participants that they are both willing to die for the outcome, I don't think that should necessarily not be allowed.
Again, why? On the whole, it is bad for society.
Why is it bad for
Well,
society? Society is massively overpopulated with idiots.
It depends how you define society, but as it currently stands, we define society based upon the fact the existence of the people. If you start removing the people, you are reducing society. You are harming society. I have a couple of other things that kind of fit into that, but the key thing is reducing people equals bad.
Does it, though?
Well, there are definitely arguments to be made for specifics where it's not true, but in general, yes.
I would think that it does in most cases. For example, because I'm a strong proponent of individual people's rights, I think that there should be no outside compulsion by society or what am I talking about? By government or society for people to be removed from it permanently by death. But I'm also a strong advocate of people's right to choose to exit it by death through assisted suicide.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree, but most societies, as it currently stands, do not agree with you. Most societies hold that assisted suicide is a bad thing.
Sorry, could you say that last bit again? I missed one word that makes the sentence make sense.
Most societies do not agree with you.
Yeah, that bit I got.
Most societies hold that euthanasia is a bad thing.
Yes, that's one of the things that I am seeking to change that would probably need to be changed for this other thing to happen.
So what you're saying is that euthanasia is a slippery slope to dueling?
Yeah, fuck it, yeah, why not?
I'm fairly certain the argument that came up as to why euthanasia should be not legalised in the UK at one point was so because people willy-nilly would be killing each other. She disagrees. The point is that I don't think you could enter into a fair dueling contract.
Why?
Because I think no matter what you... because I don't think you can adequately assess an opponent. Again, and I'm thinking along the lines at this point of swords with... How would you do it? Swords first blood, or what?
My preferred thing would be swords at the most first blood, but I don't think that necessarily further than that should not be allowed.
Yeah, but let's just work on a principle for now.
Yeah, let's go with swords first blood as principle.
I think it would be too easy to trick someone into this sort of competition.
Could you give an example?
Well, for example, you might be an expert with a sword. You might practice for an hour every day.
Mm-hmm.
and you come across someone on the street that annoys you,
Yeah.
and you challenge them to a duel,
Uh-huh.
and it turns out that they are a master swordsman. You didn't know that.
Okay.
So you're automatically end up in a situation where you have entered into a contract that you did not know the ramifications of. I mean, I do think, oddly enough, that I know under old English law you could only fight an equal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure how they determined what an equal was. It was probably status, and I could see some merit to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how you would.
I don't think it's actually necessary for it to be that you only fight an equal.
Why?
Because the whole point of a duel is that it's combat. You don't necessarily know the skills of your opponent, and you don't know for definite whether you'll win or lose. This isn't something to settle something where there is a clear right and wrong answer as such. This is something to settle something where two people can't agree, but there are merits to both sides of their argument, and neither of them is demonstrably in the wrong. So it would be something where they decide, okay, we can't decide an equitable way of doing this. Let's have a contest in order to determine the winner. We both agree.
Yes.
Hang on, I haven't finished yet. We both agree to the contest and discuss beforehand exactly what the terms are, and then engage in it.
Right, and what's to stop someone just bullying everybody because they're a better swordsman?
The fact that both parties have to agree to take part, and
Yeah, but what happens if you don't agree to take part?
You do something else. My
Then
point
it solves nothing.
My point is saying that it should never be mandatory to engage in a duel.
Yes, but when we have these things in society, it becomes. I'm not going to say mandatory. It becomes expected. I looked up actually certain things as to whether or not. I mean, would you, for example, be up for if it was just with fists, just a fight?
I'd prefer swords, but yeah, why not?
My point being, you're making it so that might is right.
No, because no one is obligated to engage in this duel unless they agree to. I'm saying that it should be an option, not that it should be enforced.
Like I said, I think it would become expected very quickly because I think it would become. I think people are idiots. People bet on the lottery.
You're reading the chat, aren't you?
I'm trying not to. Why did they say that? Oh, they did. Look at that. People bet on the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why do people bet on the lottery?
But there's lots of different reasons, but the one I go with is because they enjoy gambling and they might win. It's very unlikely that they'll win, but they might.
I'd say the majority of reasons they bet on the lottery is they don't understand the chances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that an awful lot of people entering into a duel would be exactly the same.
No thumb wars, doorknob head. My thumbs are not up to it. I'm of the opinion that it should be an option but not enforced, and the way to do that is you can just say, well, if we want to settle this with a duel, we can. You know, that option is there. We can agree to meet and settle this like gentlemen, as it were. But there should be some safeguard that's not no one's forced into it. I'm not quite sure what form that would take, though.
I can't see how you can safeguard that. I literally I cannot conceive of a way that could not be exploited to murder someone.
Although, if it was a case that that there was a code of honor that, you know, if you challenge someone they have to accept, I would immediately go and challenge Disney for the rights to Star Wars.
You'd have to challenge them one at. What do you challenge the shareholders? Do you get to keep what you win?
Uh,
Go after the shareholders one at a time.
I think I'd go for old Bob at the top. I'd say to him, right, I want the rights to Star Wars. I challenge you to a duel for them. I think I could take him.
You think you could take him?
Yeah.
I think he would have. I think he would have someone. There's a word for it in dueling, isn't it? When someone fights for you.
It would be the second, I believe.
I didn't think it was the second that fought for you.
Or a champion.
Could be a champion.
Yeah. Right. But about the safeguard idea, I think there should be a sort of a framework in place where you could just record something like, in a dispute, this person offered to settle it through a duel, the other person accepted, or the other person declined, and we moved on to the next, another stage of arbitration. That's it. That's if it was being done in a legal framework for sort of.
Yes, but my point being is, you could be coerced into that. I mean, especially now with the deep fakes, you could have a videotape of you sat there saying you are agreeing to this duel.
Yeah, but that's the same for any other legal thing that you agree to. You could the people try to forge all of these things.
Yes, entirely. But society tries to avoid things where you can ultimately end up murdering someone.
Well, it wouldn't be murder if it happened in a duel, would it?
Well, not if you've got the right video.
No, I think that side of it would need a lot more consideration.
I mean, considering how much it costs to kill someone, it would be a lot less effort to make a video saying that you want that this person agrees to a duel to settle this. Hell, you have them as the instigator if you're faking it. You killed them in self-defense in the duel.
No, I think it would need to there would need to be a framework in place where there are people to verify that they're agreeing to it at the time of the duel, and any time up until the duel commences, you can go, actually, no, I don't want to. I think there would need to be, up until the moment of it starting, there would need to be get-out clauses so that people can't be compelled to do it.
You would need a huge gap. You would need a huge gap between the initiation of the duel and the execution of it.
I don't think you would, but I think you would need it.
Hang
on! I think you would need a bit in between in order to make sure that you'd need a bit in between to settle all the paperwork side of it, and then you would need to, at the time of the duel, make sure that both parties are there and present and free of duress.
Who does that?
I don't know. There'd have to be some kind of independent adjudicator, I think.
That's paid for by what the person that's instigated it?
I think.
Are we justified in our legal murder here?
I think they'd have to the adjudicator would have to be agreed upon by both parties.
Again, if you're coercing the one party, they would have agreed to it.
Stop poking holes in my scenario, Dave.
Let's go with the extreme example. I kidnap your kid.
Okay.
And I say you've got to duel me.
Not
now, if you win the
particularly.
duel, you get the kid anyway.
Not particularly okay, but okay.
Right. Throughout that whole process, you will agree to go through with whatever.
Do I though?
Would you risk your kid?
I don't have one. I can't
Would you
answer
risk
that.
your collection of walking sticks?
That's a difficult one.
I mean, my point is, I can come up with numerous scenarios around where you can be coerced into the duel, and the duel allows you this line that once you've crossed it, you can be killed. Even if it's not up to the death duel, there is that risk, and it would be permissible, not permissible, an accepted risk. They knew the risks going into it. There was potential to die.
I think that's the same in a lot of other things. Like it's the same in many jobs.
Yes. Which is why we explicitly have people that are meant to be responsible for your safety that are not loyal to the company. Don't work quite so much well in the States.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest problem we seem to have within the job market is people don't know do not know what is best for them because they cannot judge it at the time, which is my biggest concern with dueling. We massively overestimate our own skills. Do you not think you overestimate everything?
No. I think I overestimate my ability in some areas, and I think I underestimate it in others.
Fair enough.
I think for my ability for dueling, I think I have a reasonable idea of it, and on some occasions overestimate it, and on some occasions underestimate it. By the way, I'm not suggesting this idea just because I think I'd win. Because
I don't think you would.
Because while I'm all right with various I can't speak now. While I'm okay at various historical and other sword-based martial arts, I'm not actually that great. I'm perfectly serviceable up to a point, but anyone who has a higher level of skill will probably beat me.
Oh, entirely. And I think if dueling was made legal, a lot of people would get a lot better.
Yes, probably.
And I have to say, I would devote a significant proportion of my time to bettering myself with a sword if there was sword dueling. And I thought I would likely to end up in one. Especially if you can challenge government officials. Do you not think that the problem you've got is whether or not there is harm? If you go back to it as to whether or not, so if there is no, I mean, would you be, for example, accepting in the not too distant future for virtual dueling with a sword?
Only if the virtual setup was a lot better than they currently are.
It would be. You would think you were there, but you're not going to get injured in any way, shape, or form.
Then yeah, why not?
That ruins one of my arguments, actually.
Although I would personally prefer to do it in person. I see no reason, especially given the COVID situation, why it couldn't be done virtually.
What, would you expect someone to be outside the other person with a knife to slice their face to give them the scar?
Well, not if it wasn't that level of duel, no.
And if it was?
Then I think it would have to be done in person. They'd get the scar wrong. It wouldn't be made by the right kind of implement.
Oh, very good. You can do it at a later date.
Just drop in, like, oh, can you just slash me with your sword? So that I've got the scar from that duel we did.
Do you not think by having a duel as being... I think a duel would end up being the thing of last resort.
I see no problem with it being a last resort thing.
Right. And my issue is if you want to define a society, if you want to build a society we live in, I do not think a violent act should be the end of it. I think we should be trying to move ourselves above acts of physical endurance and violence as a means to solve things. Thank you.
That's yeah. Cheers. That's partly why I specified in my premise that it shouldn't only be that. There should also be other forms of competition that are acceptable.
I understand that completely, right? But the fact is that if it is available, it becomes the thing of last resort where there is no other agreement.
I don't think it does, because if there are other forms of competition available and somebody says, we can't agree on this, we should duel with swords. And let's say I say that. I say, we can't agree on this and we should duel with swords. And the other person says, why don't we, to take an example from a chat, have a round of Monopoly instead?
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, well, I don't really like Monopoly and I'm terrible at it. So what game or other competition can we agree on? And I don't think it should be the only form of last resort. I think there should be other ways of settling things, but it should be an option.
Why would anyone agree to it if they thought that they might lose? I've already answered that with the lottery question.
Because they think they also might win, but also the lottery thing. But no, because they also might win, and that's the same as taking someone to court. If you take them to court, you might not win, even if your lawyer assures you will.
There is an expectation that you will, which I think everyone going into any sort of duel would have.
Is that an objection to the idea?
Yes. I've just forgotten where I was going with it. The problem... I think there are... Why is that a better way to solve a problem than arbitration?
Because
an expert deciding.
Arbitration relies on someone else to decide, whereas in this instance, it comes down to just the two people who have the dispute.
I don't.
If there's arbitration going on, then there's all kinds of things about, well, this arbitrator is biased, or I don't think they're acting fairly, or whatever. Whereas if it's just down to the two opposing parties in question,
you have the same problem.
No.
Yes, you do. You have to have a referee. You have a set of rules. You've said here there has to be a strict framework, a strict set of rules for the contest.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to determine whether or not those rules have been followed.
Yeah.
Right. There is just as much risk of bias there as there is in arbitration. And I'm acknowledging completely. You're right that there is the risk of bias, but I don't think there's any more or less.
I think the risk of bias becomes less. What's the word I'm looking for? I think it becomes less of an issue because it comes down to, unless something really funny happens in the rules part, it comes down to the relative skill and ability of the two people in that moment.
How?
I think there is less of a risk of bias there, or less of a not a risk of bias, less of a perception of it, because the arbitrator is only there to check that the rules are followed.
Yes, but that's pretty much all an arbitrator does, in theory.
Yeah, that's not generally how it actually goes in practice in legal cases. The arbitrator actually makes the decisions of, right, you get this and you get that, whereas in a dueling process that would be agreed upon by the parties, and then they would duel on it.
What scenarios? Okay, the only real scenarios I have seen dueling effectively used are in ones of honor.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't particularly see any reasonable situation where anything other than honor would be a thing worth dueling over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that honor, in the context we are talking about, is incredibly outdated and meaningless.
Why is that?
Because it is held over from a point at which you're standing in society, was influenced by your honor, which means where it would affect the rest of your life in that context. Whereas now, especially for us normal people, we can leave and go to another city and be known by absolutely no one tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
The inherent value of honor within the society we live is relatively less, apart from within niches. I mean, I could lie to this entire community that we have here and leave it tomorrow, and the rest of my life is completely unaffected.
That is true. But that was more true in the times we're talking about for the majority of people, because if you went a couple of towns over and nobody knew you, they couldn't ring up where you're from and check your credentials.
They had more communication than you think. I mean, you're right in that there was a certain amount of not checking. I mean, especially if you jumped on a boat. But you could, within the classes, to be honest, they didn't care. It was reset, you're right. As long as you, within the community you live, are preferred. Shit, I can't make a cogent sentence. As long as you existed within, your honor was valid within the context you lived within, it was fine. You could move out completely, which where you couldn't with the people that dueled tended to be upper class. It wasn't an option to just move on. Does that make sense?
Not entirely, because I'd say it would be more of an option to just move on for the upper class, because they'd actually be able to afford to.
Yeah, but they couldn't move anywhere where their credentials would be meaningless. You are dependent upon... I mean, it's the reason we have the relative code that we have. It's the reason our passports are granted in the name of the Queen. It is your credentials, and it's all the way down, and your honor follows all the way down that. You just got very quiet, by the way.
Say more words when I fix it.
More words while you fix... Oh, you want to say meaningful words?
Yeah, let's go with that. Hopefully that's fixed it.
That's very loud, that's fine. No.
Right.
Where are you? Okay, let's go back. We've kind of detracted massively into the past rather than the forward. What scenario can you see that would be worth dueling over now?
Here's a scenario.
Well,
During the process of portioning out someone's estate after their death, there is a family heirloom that two of the person's descendants both want. It's not mentioned in the deceased person's will who is supposed to get that thing. It was either an oversight or the person just didn't write it in for whatever reason. Both parties want the thing and they can't decide, so they decide to say, right, we shall duel and the winner will receive the thing.
And how is that better than auctioning it?
Because then actually one of the parties gets the thing rather than it going to auction.
No, auctioning it between the two of them.
And because then if you auction it between the two of them, it's just down to who can afford it.
Yes. How is that? How is their skill over their lifetime in accumulating wealth any less valid than their skill with the sword?
Because it is, Dave, that's why!
The problem is, I got stuck over and over again when I tried to look into this on the fact that you can include a random sports event as a duel.
Well, let's put it this way then. Even if you assume that someone's skill in whatever chosen contest they use as the duel is not more... What was the word you used?
I've forgotten.
Oh, fine. Is not more relevant than their skill at obtaining money.
Yeah.
Why should that? Why is it not fine for that to be an option?
It is.
If both parties,
but my point is, the person with more money, the person with more money is not going to accept the duel.
Why not?
That's why I said a situation where the people would accept the duel and accept a duel over something else.
I think people would. I don't think all people would, but I think some people would.
Yeah, but that's why I was asking you, in what scenario?
No, well, that is the scenario I've come up with, and I think for some people in that scenario, they would accept a physical contest over who can pay for it. And I'm saying that should be an option.
But again, why would anyone that has more money and therefore can afford to buy it willingly risk losing it if they want it?
I think this would be much more likely to happen between people who already get on.
And then you're talking sportsmanship more than you're talking, so you're basically talking a bet.
Yeah, that's kind of what dueling culture was.
Which we can do now. And apart from the fact that it was honour that was at stake, and when you include the honour, it becomes more meaningful. It becomes more than just a bet. It becomes about reclaiming something, and this is the only way to reclaim it.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be that.
Again, it becomes so that it does have to become that if it's available, or it becomes useless.
No, I don't think so. It just becomes another option that they can do. If you have two people who don't want to do that, or one person who does and one person who doesn't, then you don't have to do it. But hang on. If both people want to do it, then they can. I don't see why that shouldn't be an option.
Any person that has got a an alternative to get, if they actually want the thing, and there is an alternative way where they have a greater chance of getting it, they would take that option.
I don't agree.
Neither do I. I think in most cases they would. Let's put it that way.
I will agree to you in as far as in more cases than not, that's probably true.
Right.
But I don't see why it shouldn't be an option for the not more cases that would be willing to settle it that way.
Because of the risk of exploitation once it was set up.
Well, let's for the sake of argument get rid of the to the death option completely.
Right. Go on.
What about that? There's no legal to the death duel option over whatever the dispute is, but you can have a physical contest with swords or fists or whatever to certain pre-agreed upon rules in order to settle things. Why should the minority of people who would be willing to do that not be able to?
It's an interesting question. Because, well, are you assuming here that if you did if you killed someone, you would be charged with murder?
No, but you could be charged with manslaughter.
All right, you can be charged with manslaughter.
Because it wouldn't, unless it could be proved that you went into it with the intent of killing them, it would be an accidental death.
You planned this out.
I have thought about it, yeah. So
Right.
there would be consequences if it went too far, is what I'm saying. Although you would still get the grandfather clock or whatever it was you were fighting over.
So even if you killed them, you'd have classed of winning the duel. I think you should have to
they're
forfeit.
not going to need the thing afterwards, are they?
Yes, but I think there should be forfeit.
I think being charged with manslaughter would be enough forfeit.
But again, it makes it. I think that you. I have a question that I always meant to look up but never did.
Okay.
If you murder someone and you are named in their will, do you still get everything?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose. I think there are actually legal clauses where you don't, but I don't know what they are.
Because I mean, the point is, I can see a massive problem if you can still benefit from it.
All right then, let's put in a thing where if you accidentally kill them during the duel, or if you deliberately kill them during the duel against the rules of the duel, you don't get whatever the thing was.
I'm sorry, just checking. No, you don't. If you murder them, you don't get it.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So the same thing. So there is an active incentive to make sure you don't kill them.
Yes.
Is my point. Oh, do you know what? That gives me another great scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm dying,
Yeah.
and I challenge you to a duel,
Yes.
I can throw myself on your sword, basically, and you lose everything. You're charged with manslaughter, and you lose the duel.
I don't think that would actually be the case, because if you could demonstrate through the adjudicator that the person intended to have you kill them...
I don't know how you would do that.
Well, I think... Let's say you filmed it, and the person... You could show that the person deliberately threw themselves onto your sword, assuming it was done with swords. I think at that point you'd have to duel somebody else to determine that.
This is gonna go on forever. You're gonna jump on this, or
You're gonna be dueling for decades.
you are. which
No,
leads to an interesting problem.
I think at that point there would that would become another legal case outside of the case for whether dueling should be a thing or not.
Yes.
Because at that point, you could argue that the person committed suicide deliberately.
Yes. The problem, I'm gonna squeeze back all the way. Here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there is any point in it.
Well, there's not a lot
If
of
we
point
do
in a
not
lot
have-
of things people do.
That's very true. But whether or not society endorses it, which is required in this situation. I don't think that there is a point in it beyond what we can do now with a bet or a contract over a sports game.
The point is that it's done through having a duel.
Yes, but the duel, we already said, a duel can be a sports game. We can do that now. Me and you can sign a contract that says we are going to have a game of squash. And the winner of this game of squash, as determined by X, will get your house.
So could we at the moment have a contract that said we duel to first blood and the person who draws first blood gets the house?
I'm not sure about... I looked up, and I think so.
Oh, well then why are we having this discussion? Let's go do it. I want your house.
I think that's... You can bet whatever you want, which is basically what you're talking about. It's a bet. You're betting on yourself winning. And you can have a contract that outlines that. The issue you've got with is whether or not it is classed as an offence that they would prosecute without your permission.
I think that is the point where it becomes interesting. At that point, my view is, if both parties agree and consent to it, not under duress, then it should not.
Oh, I agree with you. Apart from that, we especially in the UK, have introduced laws because of situations where people were fearful of pressing charges.
Right, I think those laws should go then. Or at least
those
in
laws
their
aren't.
current
Those laws
form.
are necessary. There might be grounds for excluding them in this sort of situation.
Then they should either have exemptions or should go. I am all for removing laws that remove freedom.
The laws were not removing freedom; they were adding protections.
Which, through their very nature, removes freedom, at least in some instances.
They were required, shall we say? I am for them. They protect the worst. They remove the freedoms.
I'm not sure which laws we're on about right now. So
we're on laws that say that if I assault you, if I walk along and punch you, I punch you to a bloody pulp.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have to necessarily press charges against me. The Crown can.
But in that scenario, I haven't agreed to be punched.
No.
If I have agreed to be punched first...
No. The question is, if you have agreed to be punched, the Crown can still prosecute me.
Yes, I don't think that should be the case if it's in the scenario of a duel. I think it should be...
Again, I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with over that sentiment.
Has been agreed to by both parties of sound mind and not under duress. The Crown should not be able to prosecute them for carrying out that activity.
Do you know how many abuse victims turn around and say, "But I deserved it"?
Not the number, but I know it happens.
Right. This is the point. This is what they are trying to protect against. They are. You have something, a law, and I'm not disputing the exclusion, but you have to understand why the law is in place. The law is to protect the weakest in the society at that point in time, at the cost of the freedoms of people with more privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's not to say. I think, again, this is one of those situations that can be solved with time. That you could not agree to something, to not sign off on something, and then have it happen within a week, nay, 2 weeks. So as long as it was agreed well in advance to potential injuries, and then you could bypass that situation.
So a cooling off period for people to go, oh, actually, I kind of signed up for this in the heat of the moment and I really don't want to.
Yes. Very much so.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, actually. And I think that should go right up until the moment that the thing commences. So at any point up until that moment, you could say, actually, I don't want to.
I think even during you can say I don't want to, but you can't. The other person can't be held responsible for what happens until that point. At which I think you need a safe word, basically.
Oh,
I think you can end the duel at any point by forfeiting.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Once it's commenced, you can forfeit and not have the physical or whatever consequences of continuing with the activity, but you do, once it's commenced, forfeit and lose.
Yes. So yes, I agree with that. How far? Where are we at? We're basically agreeing.
Just a quick thing from the chat. Dueling banjos, I don't think will work because unless someone is demonstrably and obviously terrible, it's entirely subjective.
When are Bad Dave and Badger commencing with handbags at 20 paces?
What are we going to do with handbags at 20 paces?
I don't know. Charge at each other?
I suppose we'd throw them.
I don't think they would be very aerodynamic.
No, I suppose it would just be who hits the other one.
Can my handbag be a breeze block with a strap?
I don't think it qualifies as a bag at that point because you.
How about if I put a bottom on it?
No, you still can't put items in it.
Well, I can if I put a bottom on the breeze block. Breeze blocks have got holes in, 2 holes.
Yeah, it'd still be an impractical bag.
Have you seen the handbags that some of these people have got?
No, that's a good point. Well, going back to the consent issue, I don't agree with. I don't consent to having a breeze block handbag thrown at me. Yes, I do know the Dueling Banjo song, but my point is that if you want to use playing the banjo as your chosen contest, it's entirely subjective, so it wouldn't really work for this scenario.
No. The problem I've got is how do you justify the expense of policing it? Ultimately, if you want my serious answer, I've got no problem with the freedoms. I've got massive problems with violence being last resort. But my biggest issue is the cost of policing it. I don't think there will be enough duels to justify the cost of policing it.
I don't think that's much of an objection myself, because
why?
There are some places in the world, I can't think where, I'd have to look it up, where if 2 people agree to fight each other, they can legally do that until one is knocked to the ground, at which point they have to stop legally.
Yes, agreed. There are. I mean, this is why I mentioned
that doesn't. I
punching.
don't think that requires any more policing than anywhere else, really.
Maybe not.
There would be a little bit more if it was for. Well, there would be considerably more if it was a legal contract-based duel with. What the hell am I talking about? Legal contract-based duel with over something. But I think it might actually cut down on the cost of lawyers because they wouldn't have to adjudicate it. The adjudication would come down to who won the duel rather than lawyers talking to each other for weeks or months or years.
No, because they have to negotiate the circumstances of the duel.
That's true. But I think...
I mean, you're right. It would be contract law. Lots and lots of contract law. They'd make a fortune.
Yeah, maybe.
Nerdy says offset the cost via ticket sales.
Yeah, that might work.
That would encourage people to duel.
It would encourage famous people to duel.
You think?
Yeah.
If we found a reality TV show, you'd go on.
I mean, apart from like a couple of people I know, who the fuck is gonna buy tickets to a duel with me in it?
Oh, people. I mean, who the hell paid to go and see people's heads cut off? Society will degrade.
No, I don't think so. I don't think combat sport degrades society. In fact, I think modern combat sport elevates society in many ways.
I think it can. It depends whether or not it's. Like I said, I think it comes down to whether or not I think it's a solution to something.
I also
think combat sports.
I also think that many humans are inherently violent, and trying to pretend they're not is suppressing something which will eventually come bubbling out again. So there needs to be outlets.
Absolutely agree. 100% agree. I think an aggression outlet is to some degree a good thing, and we have seen computer games do that.
And I also think that if two people with that need want to settle something in that way, I don't think they should be stopped from doing it, as long as there are some safeguards in place to make sure they both agree to it fairly.
I mean, like I said, I'm inclined to agree in general. My issue then is on the practicalities, and I think policing it would be a problem, which I think where we're going to disagree.
Yeah, it could be. And it could be where we're going to disagree.
Yes. We can agree to legal dueling and disagree on how it could be implemented, which I think is a nice place to keep it. We could jump to an after party and invite these lovely people in.
We could
see what they think.
I will need to toodle off in a little while, but we can have a little quick chat.
We can have a little quick chat. Okay.
Do you want to host a thing? We can do a quick stream if you like.
I will do a quick stream onto the non-com channel.
All right. Anyone put in the place message the people for the thing? Yes.
He's good.
Oh, I've got an outro as well.
Have you?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, hang on. I've got to set it up. Right, thanks very much for coming, everyone. My guest today has been CriticalCripple, who some of you probably know from the internet. So who are you, and where can people find you?
They can find me as CriticalCripple on Twitter and CriticalCripple on YouTube. And if I was organised, I'd put a link in chat, but I'm not.
There's a link to your Twitter in the description.
Excellent.
Right, outro. So where's the thing got to? There we are. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. If you want to appear in an after doodle, message Dave on the twit. And here is the outro.
All right, I can see that I will